Welcome to Medgar Evers College TV, brought to you by the students of the Department of Mass Communications. I'm Dana Isaacs, and this is a special program about the implications of Roe versus Wade if it's overturned in the Supreme Court.
And I'm Amanda Barrett. We brought in experts in the field of law, counseling, and medical to get their perspective of the future of women's bodies here in America.
We have lawyer and Professor Wallace Ford from the Department of Public Administrations here at Medgar Evers School of Business. Here's Professor Jessica Mason with our first guest.
Hi, I'm here with Professor Wallace Ford. How you doing today, Professor?
It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm grateful to have you on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So, Roe versus Wade, topic of the freaking country going on at this point. And let me tell you something. I'll be honest. This really only comes as a shock to folks who weren't paying attention. Because quite frankly, I've been worried about the Supreme Court since 2010. I don't know about you. What about yourself?
Well, I'm a graduate of Harvard Law School, so I had to be paying attention to the constitutions for the last 50 years and the Supreme Court. To your point, they weren't paying attention. They weren't paying attention. These people said what they were going to do, which is, since Roe v. Wade became law, the law of the land in 1973, there's been people who said we're determined not just to have restrictions on abortion, which is the Supreme Court. Roe v. Wade said the states could put reasonable restrictions, but people said no, we want to abolish abortion.
If and when they turn over Roe versus Wade, what protections does this provide for young girls, at least within the tri-state of New York? Let's start there.
Well, the tri-state, if we define that, is New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Mm-hmm. They all have very robust laws which protect a woman's right to choose, along with the necessary health care facilities so that a woman can exercise that right in a safe fashion. But it literally depends on what state you're in. If you're in the state of Texas, you're looking at a new law that will come in probably which says that pregnancy begins at conception. Okay, and Mississippi, probably the same thing. Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, these are all, say, Idaho, and there's about 26 to 28 states that will have very severe restrictions that basically ban abortion, which means that if you are a woman that lives in one of those states and you don't have the ability, let's say you don't have the airfare to fly to New York, Connecticut, California, something like that, or you can't leave your job for a week, or you can't leave your children for a week. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people can't just up and go, right? And you're in a lot of trouble. You're in a lot of trouble.
So in other words, there is no hope for the ladies, young ladies, or women in general, if you live in the South or the Midwest, in other words.
There's very little. There's very little. Because it's on a state-by-state basis is what you're looking at. It is hard to overstate how bad this is. And the sooner people understand how bad this situation is, people will finally, the people who are against abortion have been working in a very focused fashion over the years to make this happen. They're looking at the city councils. They're looking at the state legislatures. 26 of the 50 states are Republican-led at this point, even though Republicans are not the majority party nationally at all. They don't have to take the popular vote as a mandate if they don't want to.
What will happen to society?
Well, that's a bigger question, because if they think that this Supreme Court, this 6-3 supermajority, proto-conservative, neoconservative majority on the Supreme Court is through after Roe v. Wade, then they're not paying attention. We're talking about same-sex marriage for sure is toast. Affirmative action is gone. You would just forget it. Affirmative action, whether you're talking about education, whether you're talking about in business, affirmative action is gone. These are all the things that have been fought for over decades, and we let it all go by because we weren't paying attention. If all of the things I just played out, and I'll grant you, it's a rather dim view at the very least, if all these things go through, these young people now, my son's 25, he's going to be 40 in a world that is damn near dystopian in terms of rights and in terms of ability to do things. Just if he, depending literally on which state you're in. That's what we have. That's what happens when you don't pay attention.
What concerns you the most about the Supreme Court's handling about Roe versus Wade?
I think what concerns me the most is that it's intellectually, the decision that at least the draft we see is intellectually dishonest, to say the least, to say that somehow There's a case, Plessy v. Ferguson, 1896. Supreme Court decision basically said that racial segregation in the states was constitutional, as long as it was separate but equal.
Right.
Okay. 1954, we have Brown versus Education that says racial segregation is unconstitutional and overthrows Plessy. Okay, now what they're saying is that Roe v. Wade is kind of like Plessy v. Ferguson, and we're overturning that because it was wrong on its face. Problem with that is that Plessy v. Ferguson took away rights. Okay, Brown versus Education versus Board of Education restored rights.
Right.
Okay, Roe v. Wade conveyed rights to women. Okay, this decision we're talking about right now will take away rights. Okay, there's a big damn difference. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. It's just intellectually dishonest.
And I heard this somewhere, and it can confuse me. Will miscarriages be investigated by police now to see if whether or not it was done on purpose?
I'm sure there will be monitors out there who will suggest that to happen. There, at one point, I think it was like 2012, when abortion was still illegal in Ireland. There's a woman who was in her third trimester and was suffering a miscarriage, and the doctors did not want to take the steps to abort the child at that point, and the mother died. The baby died also.
Oh, man.
But the mother died because the doctors were afraid of getting prosecuted. So look for that in this country. Yeah.
There was a case in Connecticut back in '65, I think, Griswold versus the state of Connecticut. Had to do with contraceptives, correct?
That's right.
Whether or not married folks had the right to use contraceptives.
Right.
What gives the state that power?
Well, you know, the state did have the power, and what the Supreme Court ruled in '65 was that it was an invasion of the right of privacy. And so that's why basically the law against sale of contraceptive devices was ruled unconstitutional. We may see a return to that. And so what I would say to young people, whether, you know, my son's 25, going on 26, learn, understand, follow the news, for God's sake. If you're not being aware of what's going on in your community, in your state, in your country, then you're in grave danger of having further rights taken away or eroded. If you're not at the table, then you're on the menu, and you don't want to be on the menu.
Professor, I cannot thank you enough for that law information.
My pleasure.
Back to you.
Our next guest is a doctor of obstetrics and gynecology from SUNY Downstate Medical Center, Dr. Eddie Mandeville. Here's Nathalie Gregoire with that interview.
From a medical point of view, I'm here with Doctor of OBGYN from SUNY Downstate Medical Center, Dr. Eddie Mandeville. Thank you, Dr. Mandeville, for being here. So my first question is, if Roe versus Wade is overturned, how will it affect doctors' role when it comes to women's health?
Well, it depends on what state they're in. Initially, if Roe v. Wade is overturned, it will not be nationally, and some states will retain the ability to make decisions on their own, as did New York in 1970, which was 3 years before Roe v. Wade. So abortion was quite legal in New York in 1970, and then 3 years later, Roe v. Wade overturned the anti-choice decisions around the country.
How will it change the way doctors are taught in the tri-state area?
You're asking the right question because the tri-state area has a history of being more understanding relative to women's reproductive rights. So in all the training programs in those 3 states, the probability is that it will have no impact.
And for the restrictive states, how will it change the way nurses are trained?
It'll change everything in those restrictive states. It'll essentially outlaw abortion and all the other women's health issues that go along with the providers of abortion, which are many, many other things in terms of managing and taking care of women's health in general, not just their reproductive organs.
How will the reversal of Roe v. Wade affect women's health overall?
In the states that won't allow it, there'll be closures of many institutions which allow for women to get their health care and or severely limit their ability to take care of women in a more complete way.
So what scares you the most about Roe v. Wade being overturned?
I think everybody who understands anything about what happens in this circumstance when women are faced with unwanted pregnancies will tell you that women who have a pregnancy that they don't want, a significant percentage of them, irrespective of what the law says, will attempt to terminate those pregnancies. I am firmly of the belief that we as a society, given that fact, have to make those terminations safe and legal for them. And I say that because at the beginning of my training, I saw the effects of illegal abortions, and I saw women die. That will be a real, that is the most frightening thing, because I saw that.
Yeah.
I watched it. There are not many people around who were around in that era, and I saw that happen. And it will happen again. Otherwise, they wouldn't make laws about it.
Thank you, Dr. Mandeville, for coming in today and giving us that important information from a doctor's point of view. Now, back to our host.
We have on location Professor Hermina Marcellin with the Executive Director of Medgar Evers College Center for Law and Social Justice, Lurie Favors, and her thoughts on possible law change.
Thanks, Amanda and Dana. I am Hermina Marcellin, and today I would like to welcome Dr. Lurie Daniel Favors, Executive Director for the Center for Law and Social Justice at Medgar Evers College, and a professor. Welcome. Welcome, Anthony Daniel Favors. It has been reported that a leaked opinion confirms that the Supreme Court is prepared to end the constitutional right to pro-choice by overturning Roe versus Wade. If this gets overturned, how would it advance the pro-life agenda?
Very good question, and I think it's important that we start there because we often forget that the pro-life agenda isn't really necessarily about the agenda as it is popularly marketed. What we do know is that the pro-life community really came together in earnest about 5 or 6 years after Roe versus Wade was officially upheld by the Supreme Court. And what we know from the history is that while today the popular origin story is that this was a movement that was born in resistance to the Roe versus Wade decision, it actually took quite a while for evangelicals to come around to this as something that they actually cared about. The reason this connects to the pro-life movement, to galvanize under anti-abortion or so-called pro-life as a way of really creating a space where Republicans, far right-leaning voters would be able to have an umbrella, a moral issue, if you will, that would allow them to organize. And it just so happens some of the same people who are pushing or who have consistently pushed a pro-life agenda were also the same people who were benefited by the anti-segregation efforts as well. So what we see really now in our current iteration of the pro-life movement is a collaboration of sorts. It creates an umbrella. It creates a moral majority, if you will. That's language that they often use.
How would pro-life benefit women in these restrictive states?
So again, you have to ask how we define a benefit. So if you are a part of the pro-life community, and if you believe that women should not have access to bodily autonomy, if you believe that women should not be able to make decisions over their body, well then this is a win. This is a huge win for you.
How would pro-life benefit women in these restrictive states?
In the state of Texas and in the state of Oklahoma and other states that are copying them, they are actually using the same logic that was used to support fugitive slave laws to stop women from being able to secure reproductive justice. Under the fugitive slave laws, even if you were able to escape from your slave state and get into a free state, if anyone found you there, they had an obligation to return you to enslavement. If you do secure an abortion, you are able to be sued by anyone, and you and anyone who helped you secure that abortion is able to be sued by anyone, and you would have to pay up to a $10,000 bounty fee and attorney's fees for whomever was able to sue you for securing that abortion.
Let's say a 12-year-old girl is raped and becomes pregnant. Will she be forced to have the child?
So if a person is victimized by incest or victimized by rape, there are many legislators right now who are drafting bills and legislation that says there will be no permission or no exceptions in cases of rape or incest. And that has got to horrify everyone.
Attorney Daniel Favors, what can people do to protect their rights by voting?
They have to recognize that this is a political agenda, and that the reason there is an effort to undermine our right to privacy, the reason there is an effort to undermine a woman's right to choose, the reason there's an effort to undermine integration is because there is a desire, a very firmly held desire by many in this country to take us back to segregation, Jim Crow America. And the only tool that many of us are going to be able to use, in addition to protesting, and we should protest, in addition to calling our elected officials, and we should call them, we should tweet them, we should email them and at them on all their social media, I say every single day of the week. In addition to that, we have got to go to the voting booth, which is one of the reasons why at the Center for Law and Social Justice, we launched the Advocacy Academy. It's an 11-week course. It's practically free of charge, but we provide education for our community because we were not allowed to participate in the system known as America. We only got the right to register to vote without being lynched 57 years ago. So a lot of us don't even understand how our votes are tied to every single one of these issues.
Thank you, Attorney Daniel Favors, for this energetic, informative sit-down interview with me and giving us your perspective on both sides of the argument. I am Hermina Marcellin, and now back to the show.
I'm here with Emmy-award winning journalist, actress, producer, and founder of iWoman TV, Cathleen Trigg-Jones. How are you this evening?
Hi, Dana. Thank you. I'm doing well as can be expected in light of everything that's going on in our country right now in Washington.
Nice. Well, we're here to speak about the reversal of the Roe versus Wade. If reversed, what does this do for our society?
I think, first let me just say that as the founder of what I would consider a women's movement, iWoman TV, I'm absolutely against anything that takes women's rights away. And I think this is a societal issue. It's not just an issue about women. It's not just an issue. This has nothing to do with politics. This has nothing to do with health. This has nothing to do with abortion. This is about the right of women to make a choice about what they do with their bodies.
Will women be seen as second-class citizens, do you think?
I mean, to some degree, wouldn't you say that women already are seen as second-class citizens? The mere fact that we're even deciding what a woman, that when government intervenes with what a woman should do with her body, we already are second-class citizens. It should not even be a discussion. There shouldn't be an opportunity for government to interfere in an issue like this. And again, I come from someone who was put up for adoption as a baby. I was an orphan. I wasn't wanted. So if anyone should maybe be pro-life, I should be pro-life. Right. And I'm absolutely pro-life, but I'm pro-choice. I believe that if a woman wants to bring a baby into the world, she'll bring a baby into the world. If she doesn't want to make that choice for her body, within reason, then I don't know why any man especially, but government as a whole, would have any say in that. People that are in my shoes that were put up for adoption, there's over 500,000 children in our society that are in foster care right now. That number's going to, I don't even know how many times fold we're going to see that number, right?
Do you think that there's anything that can be done to protect women's rights?
You ask what we can do. We can get out there and we can make our voices be heard. We can do what you're doing right now. Imagine you're a sophomore at Medgar Evers College and you have the opportunity to have a platform where you're interviewing people who are decision makers, people who are experts on this topic. You're giving them a voice, a platform. That's what we can do. We can do more of that.
You know, sometimes young ladies and young men, you know, young women get their menstrual as young as 9. As soon as that happens, it's easy for them to get pregnant. You know, whether they're just, you know, with their boyfriends and they don't think that it can happen at 13 or 11. It is really heartbreaking that the government will force them to over a simple mistake.
Yeah. The problem with going down this, it's a rabbit hole. You go down this dark hole with starting with we're going to overturned this decision. Now you're leaving it up to states. Now they're saying that a young girl is as young as 9 years old who's the victim of incest, which is very common, or young women who are victims of trafficking, which is very common today. You're saying that in those cases, or just a brutal attack, rape, anything, you're saying that that young woman has no rights, or an older woman even has no rights. I mean, let's just be honest. Let's just pull the covers off of this issue. This is not just going to affect women or black women or minorities. This is going to have very wide-reaching effect across all cultures and demographics in our country.
As easily as ours are stripped, as women in whole, it's easy for black and colored men for their rights to be stripped as well.
Their rights are stripped every time they walk outside the house. Their rights are stripped when they have a confrontation with a police officer who doesn't deem them a human being and decides to gun them down. You know, so our community is under attack. Our black men are under attack. Our black women are under attack. And now you're talking about increasing the poverty level. But you're also talking about decreasing the social service allotments. You're talking about taking away college and other rights, other financial issues that affect minorities and communities. Exactly. So you can't have it both ways. So, you know, either you have to increase the budget to accommodate the children that are going to now, you know, need services, absolutely, or you just need to stay out of it and just let women and professionals deal with this issue, which is where it belongs.
Did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
I just want to say, in general, I love the fact that you and your team here represent, you know, the global majority. And, you know, I love seeing women and young men behind the scenes. I love seeing the fact that you're doing this, you're getting this opportunity. We've come a long way. The mere fact that you're all standing here in this studio and that you're doing your job means we've come a long way. It wasn't always this way. When I started out in television, the people standing behind the scenes didn't look like the people standing behind the scenes, you know, today here. I'd love to be able to turn the camera on it, but you know, congratulations. You know, thank you for representing. You know, at iWoman TV, this is exactly what we want to do. We want to make sure that minorities, that women have a voice, that we're represented. We're not going backwards. There's too much at stake here. And every man who loves women, supports women, I salute you as well, because we can't do it alone. And I also just want to say, any place that we have an opportunity to come together as blacks, as minorities, as women, we are so much stronger together.
Kathleen, it was a pleasure interviewing you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me, Dana.
Now back to the show.
I'm here with Dr. Colleen Denny from the American College OBGYN, and she's here to discuss the implications of Roe versus Wade if overturned. Thank you for being here, Dr. Denny.
Thank you for having me.
So I have a couple of questions. So if Roe versus Wade is overturned, how will it affect the nurse's role when it comes to women's health?
If Roe versus Wade is overturned, that means that there's no longer any federal, national level protection for abortion access or abortion rights. Every state can do whatever it wants. We already know that 13 states have said that they will immediately ban abortion as soon as Roe versus Wade is overturned, and another 12 or 13 states will probably follow within a couple weeks or months. So that means that about in half the country, 26 states or so, abortion will no longer be an option. So this extremely common form of health care is just going to be off the table. Wow. So for nurses and doctors, that means that, you know, in discussing with their patients, when they're thinking about treatment plans, they're no longer thinking about what's safest, what's most appropriate for the patient in front of them. They have to think about, where does this patient live and what are the politicians in her area doing, basically.
Wow. So how will it change the way nursing is taught in the tri-state area?
So for the tri-state area, most of the states, all of the states, New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey, all protect abortion access at the state level. So we don't expect that for patients who live in the tri-state area that their abortion access will really change. What we do expect is that people are going to start traveling. They're going to come from other states where abortion has recently been banned, and they're going to seek care in the tri-state area. How that'll affect training is really hard to know. We expect that trainees, nursing, physicians, mid-level providers will see more patients who are traveling. They'll see more patients who have more financial concerns, patients who are struggling with insurance, patients who can't stay for follow-up, right? They have to go home and take care of their families. They can't be seen again. And we'll probably see more complications of unsafe abortions, to be honest.
Wow.
It really takes away part of your training for a really common form of healthcare. You're not going to know how to counsel people properly. You're not going to know how to manage complications. And it's hard to learn things after you finish training. You just simply don't have that skill set that you really should have if you're taking sort of full healthcare approach to somebody.
And so speaking of skill set, how would it affect the poor communities?
So abortion has always been disproportionately on a burden for poor communities, right? It's been increasing for years now, and we know now that about half of patients who have abortions are under the federal poverty line. So 2 people making less than $15,000 a year is the poverty line. About 75% are twice that. So the burden of abortion is already disproportionately on poor communities.
So how would it also affect the young girls and women who are forced to have these children because they have no other outlet?
They're more likely to live in poverty, right? If patients are already poor, they're more likely to remain poor. They're more likely to stay with abusive partners. They're less likely to complete their education.
So how does the restrictions of states impact mental health for healthcare workers?
I think it's a big burden. I mean, the idea that you can't offer somebody a treatment that you think is the appropriate, safe treatment for her and a treatment that she is asking you for, that's really frustrating as a healthcare provider. But the idea that it's being completely taken out of their hands, that they can't even make the decision if they want to, is sort of a different level of frustration and complication for a lot of the people, certainly in my circle and the people I know who work in different states.
How would the reversal of Roe versus Wade affect women's healthcare?
I mean, I think in summary, it's a disaster. We're going to have this situation in the United States where half the states can't provide one of the most common form of health care. And abortion is part of health care. It's part of primary care. It's part of reproductive health care. And to be honest, there's no evidence that bans on abortion decrease abortion. People will still have abortions. They just won't have them with doctors' help or with doctor's supervision.
So Dr. Denny, tell us how men could actually show their support.
That's a great question. Groups like Planned Parenthood of America, which does so much work in so many states to make sure that people have good reproductive health care, supporting campaigns to make sure that things like birth control is free. The patients can access birth control they want to be and don't have unintended pregnancies in the first place.
So Dr. Denny, I want to ask a little personal question. So what scares you the most as a medical physician?
Is hearing stories from my colleagues who are really at the end of their careers about what being an OBGYN was like before Roe versus Wade. You know, hospital wards filled with young women who had unsafe abortions and had some damage or some illness or some infection afterwards, and we just don't see that anymore. We certainly don't see it in New York, and I worry that we're going to go back towards that.
Thank you, Dr. Denny, for being here, giving us all the important healthcare information. We truly do appreciate it. Now back to the show. Thank you, Dana, for discussing an important decision that will affect millions of young girls and women throughout America. I'd also like to thank our fellow BFA students and their guests for all that important information. I'm Amanda Barrett.
Please visit us at Medgar Evers College and check out our Bachelor's of Fine Arts degree program. I'm Dana Isaacs. Thank you for watching.
Bye.